Saturday morning yoga. Hopefully we'll make it through the full time period together. So we're gonna start with a reclining butterfly shape. You can lie down just on the floor without any support, or if you'd like, you can elevate your upper back a little bit with either a blanket or a pillow or a couple of yoga blocks, whatever you've got handy. I'm gonna use a pillow underneath my upper back, and you could do that with a rolled up blanket or whatever you have. And then I'm gonna put a little blanket underneath my knees, and again, you can support your knees if it's helpful to support them, either by rolling up a prop or putting a little block under each knee. If you've got like a book nearby, sliding a little book under each knee would work. You just want to make sure that it's the right amount of sensation. So if you lie down, however you decide to do the upper body, and then when your knees drop open, if it feels like it's too spicy, then you can take a prop, and especially if it hurts around the knee or the hip joint, you can take a prop and use that to create a little bit of stability and structure. So with the yin-yang class, I always start with the yin, which are slower postures. We stay a while, get a little deeper into things. So the first part is just get settled and then see, do you need to readjust? Do you need a little more support? And then let yourself sink in. Now with yin postures, what we're going for is that point where you feel sensation, but not the point where you feel like you almost can't stand it anymore. So we want to lean more into, oh, I feel that, and away from how long is this pose? So we don't want to create tension in the body. We're trying to relax the body as much as we can, relax all the tissue, but still have that little bit of feedback that we're giving the fascia particularly, but all of the connective tissue on some level. Just that little bit of pull, little bit of tug. The connective tissue is rather resistant to to extreme measures. It likes to be coaxed into letting go. So that's the notion. We're trying to gently coax the tissue a little bit less sticky, a little more mobile. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is encourage the production of fluid between the layers of tissue. So what helps us feel flexible is that there's hydration in between the layers of fascia and skin, and fascia and muscle, and fascia that lays next to each other because muscles touch. So if we can get layers of fluid moving in those areas, that's the notion. And it turns out putting a gentle amount of stress on that tissue helps it do that. And then the other half of the equation is we have to stay with that a little while. So because we're staying for a while, we don't want to be aggressive. So we're going to stay here for about 2 more minutes. And I'm slowly feeling my shoulder unwind. And as that happens, I adjust my arms to allow for a little bit more heaviness. And maybe even a tiny bit more sensation. So as the pose unfolds, if you find that you don't feel anything, you can ease away some of the support. to take about 3 more breaths here. We're going to take the knees and bring them together first. Now you can just straighten out the legs or do this little kind of just bringing them back to the center. I'm going to use this blanket in a moment, so I'm just going to set that off to the side. And then I'm going to roll to the side and remove the pillow or anything else you may have under your upper back, so that the upper back then lays back down on the floor. And for just a moment, I'm going to just sort of hang out with the sensation in my upper back. I like to rock a little bit and try to get the shoulder blade to come off a little bit off to the side so I can get to that tissue in between them. And then pause for a moment and let the body relax. Now, when I have my back elevated a little bit and I've got an opportunity for the shoulder to drop around, the sensation for me, as long as I've kept my arms relatively close, really lands deep in the shoulder stabilizing tissue. So really deep layers of muscle and the connective tissue that holds that muscle together onto the bones. So it's subtle, but there's a kind of light, broadening sensation that happens in my upper back and across the chest. So notice the sensation that's available there for you. And this is one of the keys to practicing yin yoga, in my opinion, is, in my humble opinion, is developing this kind of sensitivity. Because if we approach yin yoga like a rhinoceros, it's, I don't know, maybe rhinoceros are sensitive and I'm disparaging them, but we have a greater chance of doing damage. Whereas if we approach it very subtly, we have a better chance of doing good for ourselves. Now, that being said, we're going to get into a hip flexor stretch that can be quite intense. So mindful, very kind is the approach. So I am going to use this blanket to elevate my hips just a bit. So I'm going to fold it into thirds. And then I'm going to lift my hips up enough to give myself just a little tiny bit of an elevated hip. Now, that blanket is under my sacrum, so that the 2 wings of my pelvis and then the little sacrum is supported by the blanket, okay? That's important. If it's too close to my lower back, it'll push my sacrum around and it won't feel good. And if it's, under the sacrum, then it's going to support all those joints. So I'm going to stretch my left side first. So that's the leg I'm going to take out long. And then I'm going to bring this right leg in. Now, you can hold this leg in a lot of different ways. You can just grab the thigh and hug it in. You can hold onto the thigh and the foot so it comes across the body, a little more like a pigeon almost. Or you can do a little half happy baby, which is what I'm going to do. So this is almost more like a lunge upside down. So holding on, I'm just going to let this arm get heavy. And then what I'm after is the hip flexor area here. So I'm going to stretch my leg out and then let it rest. And I'm going to try to let gravity and time do the job of kind of opening up that hip flexor. So we're going to stay here for about 2 minutes. Finding it tricky to hold on for that long with the arm, you can definitely change the arm position. Maybe you can hold on to your big toe for part of it, hold on to the outside of the foot or the inside, or change even how you're holding onto the knee. So just whatever's going to work for you. I find the arch a good handle most of the time for these longer shapes. to take 2 more breaths. And then we're going to release this leg that we're holding on to. And before we do anything else, we're going to put this leg nice and slow down to the ground. And then just do a little bit of movement. I like to do just a little side-to-side shimmy, but you could do whatever movement feels good for your left side. Now, before we do the other side, we're just going to see what happened. So I'm going to slip the blanket out, stretch out both of my legs, and then just see if there's a difference between the way the 2 legs feel. The hip, the spine even, sides of the waist. And if there's any tenderness or soreness. Like if I was a little too aggressive in the way that I held my leg, there might be some soreness in the hip joint, right? Or in the groin. So I want to be mindful of that. So if everything feels pretty good, and for me it feels pretty good, I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. So take this guy, put him back under there if I can get hold of the edge. There it is. Okay, so now the right side is going to be the side that I'm letting the hip flexor open on, and I'm going to bring this left leg in. And again, you can hold it in all those different ways. I start by stretching that right leg out long and then trying to just let it relax. Stay for a bit. Take 2 more breaths. And we'll let the foot go. Put it down nice and easy. Bring the other one in. Oh, so easy. And then we're going to get the hips up. And slide the, whatever you've got underneath you. Whatever you put under there to support yourself. Alright, so I'm going to go back and just double check that I didn't do anything to myself that I'm going to regret later, and just see if there's a difference. And there's a kind of overall sense of lengthening, which I like. Feels like my legs are a little longer. And a sense of kind of relaxation, but I don't feel anything really sore or tender. So that for me says, okay, cool, we can do that again. And this is just how I learn from my practice, and hopefully it makes sense to you to learn from yours that way as well. Now, we're going to come up to a seated position, and we're going to do one more little hip opener while we're here doing the yin, a little bit more intense, potentially. So if you want to take a few moments to do some cat-cow shapes or some other shapes like that, you're welcome to do that. I'm going to windshield wiper for a second, and then I'm going to sit up. So you have a little bit of chance to move around if it would feel good. Now I'm going to use a block for this next section. And what you can also consider, is elevating the hips. So if you tend to have really tight hips when you sit on the floor, elevating them can be really useful. So you could sit up on your blanket that you had folded if you had one, if you were using a blanket, or you can sit on, you know, pillow or phone book. Do people have phone books anymore? Whatever you got. So when you get here, we're going to take one leg and put it on top of the other. Now you can do this like this, where you put your knees on top of each other. That in the yin world is called the shoelace pose. Or you can do a little bit broader shape like this, where you have the shins on top and you sort of make a square. It's called square pose in the yin world. I like to do the square pose, but with one little extra. So I put a block right there in front of my knee and put my ankle on my block instead of on my thigh. It's tender right there. And I like the ankle bone being on some other surface than my thigh. But you might also put the block further out. So if you take the leg and angle it out, it might actually be nicer for your hip. So you can play with the angles, whether they're going in more or out more. Now, you just want to, the closer the legs are toward each other, the more this outer hip is going to get the sensation. So that's kind of the general area that we're aiming in, but you adjust your body appropriately. You can also fill in gaps with pillows or blankets to make sure that everybody's happy. Now, if you feel any pressure in your knee, don't go further into the pose. You can even lean back a little bit. If the hips are experiencing a little bit of sensation and we go further, sometimes we can do damage to the knee. So you want to be very mindful of your knee. Sitting up tall, you can lean into this. You can even go all the way forward and put your elbows on the ground if you want. So you just want to get to a place where you're feeling some sensations, particularly in the outer hip that's on the top. We'll hang out here for about 3 minutes. It's a little bit longer pose. Just take nice deep breaths. Close to that halfway mark, so it's a good point to kind of pay attention. Are you getting invited to go a little further? Are you being pushed backwards a little bit by your connective tissue? Is your breath shallow, or can you breathe nice and deep? Do you find little areas like right between your eyebrows that furrow up or get tight? Maybe you're holding tension in your mouth or your jaw. So those are little signposts that we use to see how things are going. If the nervous system is tensing up your body, then it's probably an indication you should back off. It's also potentially a habit, so you can check in with that as well. So we're going to take 3 more breaths. Now to come out of this, we're going to first back off a little bit. So we're going to take a nice big inhale. Hold that in, let yourself lift all the way up and lean back. And then as you exhale, just unwind your legs. You're going to pause for a moment. Just rinse that out. I'm not going to go anywhere right away. I'm going to give it at least another 30 seconds. Now, there's a point where I feel the permission to go forward. And it just feels like my body relaxes a little bit more. So see if you feel that moment for yourself. And then when you get that signal, if you haven't already, then you can come into this other side. Sometimes one side will be a little bit more challenging than another, so just acknowledging that. And once you sort of find your way in, we're just going to settle for about 3 minutes. Breathe in deep here, please. Again, if you find that you're getting sensations or little signposts that you should back off, definitely do. As we kind of get through this end of this first minute, there might be some invitation to go a little deeper, so you can notice that and maybe go for that. Last minute, we're almost to the end here. Just noticing the breath again. Good morning, sunshine. Take a big breath. We're going to float ourselves up and out of here and unwind the legs. Give it a little rinse out. Oh. Morning, yummies. Alrighty. So again, you don't have to go anywhere right away. You can take a few seconds and just kind of let everything settle. And then when you're ready, we're going to take ourselves into a little bit more movement. So I'm going to go into a child's pose and do a little shoulder stretch. I invite you to come with me. But if you're realizing you need something else, you can certainly make your own decisions about that. Because we're going to eventually wind up at the top of the mat. So I'm going to do a little child's pose, a little shoulder stretch, a little down dog, and then get there. So I give you permission to follow your own instincts or to follow along with me. So I'm going to take the knees a little on the wide side. So I've got a wide base. I'm going to start with my right arm underneath my left elbow. And then the left arm you could wrap around. I like to use it to sort of push myself back so I can get into under the shoulder blade. And then I'm going to move my hips just a little bit side to side, just to see what the kind of range of motion along the side waist does. So doing it one way gives me a little bit more leverage into the shoulder than the other. And so just kind of explore. One more breath here. Okay. So then I'm going to come out of there. Give that arm a little shimmy. That's nice. All right, so then we're doing the opposite side. So again, I'm going to start by threading the arm underneath. Figure out how I'm going to align everything. And then once I'm using my spare arm to get myself rolled onto the shoulder a notch, then I'm just really subtly moving the hips because it changes the stretch in my upper back. So see how it works for you. It's not a big movement. It's very tiny. So one more breath there. And then I'm going to let that arm come out. Give it a little shimmy. Alright, so this is where you could land if you're following me. It's just in a child's pose. It feels nice. It's a lovely place to land. If you want to create a little bit more upper back kind of interest, sensation, we're going to bring the knees in, and I'm going to just back up a little bit so that it feels almost like I've got a little bit of room to drop in. Now, I like my forehead on the floor, but some people do the chin. And so there's a bigger sensation in the upper back. Two more breaths. I'm going to just shoot myself forward a bit onto my elbows and then push it back. Some people call that heart chakra pose. I'm trying to think of the other names I've heard for it. It can be kind of intense, but it's an interesting back bend, right? It's an interesting take on a back bend. So when you're ready, you can come to downward dog. If downward dog is your jam, then hold it for a bit, move around in it, play with it. If it's not your jam, then go for a forward bend instead maybe, or some other kind of variation. Again, you have permission to do what you think is right for you. When it seems like the right time to come to a forward bending shape, make your legs a little wider. And with this little bit wider shape, I'm going to turn the toes out, sway over to one side. Now, I've got bent knee over here and a straight leg over here, I'm just going to switch which leg is bent, but I'm going to keep the torso over here. So there's a little stronger stretch in the hamstrings. And then do it again. And then a little bit of movement. I'm going to do that one more time on this side. Bend both knees, come back to the center, swing it all the way around. And then I've got a straighter leg now over there. And then I'm going to straighten out this leg that I'm leaning over, which gets a little sharper in the hamstrings, and then bend the knee. And straighten it out. And then bend it again. And one more time, I'm going to go for a straighter leg here. And then bend the knee, bend the other knee, come around, and then come up halfway. And then all the way to standing, give yourself a nice big stretch. And you get there. Oh, high front. Oh. And then we're going to wind up at the top of the mat, or whatever that means to you, at one side of the mat for a mountain pose. And then once you get to your mountain pose, pause in it for a moment. Notice if your shoulders hang the same. And can you let the arms relax to a degree that it doesn't really matter if they're exactly even, just notice what is. But allow there to be a kind of sense that the shoulders are relaxed. Not slumping forward, but relaxing down the back. Can you grow a little taller without locking your knees out? Can you spread out your toes and plant them without gripping too hard? Just finding a balance between action and passivity or receptivity. Could be one or the other. One more breath here. Now we're going to shift the weight into the right leg. We're going to bring the left ankle up on top of the right thigh. So I'm going to bend my knee just a little bit and sink a bit like I'm going into a chair pose. And then once I get the balance, I can sink in a little deeper. You can keep the hands at prayer. You can bring the arms overhead like you would for a chair pose. You can bring your arms back behind you if you're not going to interfere with your plant life too much. It gets wobbly, catch. You can sink in deeper if the hip is feeling kind of good. Does this feel a little bit reminiscent of where we've already come from? Take in one more breath. We're going to pick up this left leg and step it back. So we're going for a warrior two. Hello. So you want to find your hips in a good spot. Find your torso in the middle of all of that. Take a moment there with that warrior two. Why is it called a warrior pose? What is it about this pose that feels fierce? Because there is a pose called fierce pose. That's technically the definition of chair pose, or the translation. And so if you like, come back to reverse warrior, and then to a side angle pose. And then we're going to pause for a moment in this side angle, adjust the angles of the hip, adjust how far into or out of the pose you are. Adjust the breath to the pose. And then we're going to take this into a bound triangle. So if you can do the full bind, you're going to take your front arm around and hook your arm up in there and grab hold of your hand behind your back. If you're like me and the full bind isn't available, just do the half bind, and then you can press the hand into the leg of it, and the leg into the arm. It's not an easy bind, this pose. going to do 2 more breaths with the bind. And then we're going to release the pressure, so relax the arms and swing this around to a wide angle forward bend. Okay, now you could continue with this binding effort, but this time now bringing the arms all the way around behind you. You can grip hold of your big toe with your peace sign fingers and take the elbows out wide, or you can take the elbows toward the floor if that's available to you. So I'm gonna do this in between one, taking the peace sign fingers and wrapping them around my big toe, and then my thumb goes right in between those 2 fingers. And then push down with the toe and pull with the arms a bit to create a bit of a shoulder, like a widening across the shoulder girdle. One more big breath. Release whatever bind you're doing, or not bind. Come on up halfway, and then we're going to take ourselves back to down dog. So I'm going to walk all the way around to the front here. Step it back. Now from here, you could just stay with dog, or you can add a vinyasa, coming into a plank, lowering down either halfway or all the way, come into a back bend, cobra, or an upward dog if that's your jam. And then taking yourself back to your down dog. And then all together now, we're going to take that left leg up and bring the left knee over to this left upper arm, or as close as we can get it. Stretch it back, sink into the heel, reach through the front of that hip. Bring it in. Stretch it back, sink through the heel, reach through the front of that hip. Bring it in. And one more time, sinking through the heel, reaching through the front of that hip. And then just step this foot as far as it goes up toward the front of your mat. Put your weight in it. Step the other foot up. Come up halfway. Exhale, fold. And then we're going to come all the way to standing. So whether you did the little optional vinyasa or not, it's up to you. And again, this is just the way that you can modify your own practice based on your energy level for the day, or what's right for your injury places. So again, we're taking this mountain pose. And pausing for a moment just to experience. Try to tune into the nuances. Is it different on your right side versus your left? And so once again, we're going to shift the weight to the left leg. I'm going to bend the knee a little bit so I can put my right ankle up on top, or right shin on top of my left thigh. And then you can sink in more or a little bit less. Choose an arm position. Your balance might be steady today, it might be wobbly today. You're just going to work with what you got. Breath. I'm going to pick up this leg and step myself back into warrior two. Oh, we're going to take a nice big breath. Come on back to reverse warrior if you care to, and then over for a side angle. Oh, I'm just going to go back and forth like that a little bit. Alright, you guys, so I'm going to hold this side angle pose. I'm going to play with it a little bit. All right, so we're gonna do a bind. So again, you can do the full bind or you can do the half bind, depending on how your arms work with your triangle. And with the half bind, I'm pressing my arm and my leg into each other. So I'm giving myself this little extra structure, picking up my kneecap. The top arm is just snipping in there and hugging in. And just breathe. There's a lot of activity with this pose. Exhale, release the bind, and again we're spinning this around into a wide angle forward bend. I'm going to take a slightly different variation here, so you can too. So one more breath. We're going to come out. And we're going to come around into downward dog. Oh. Take a moment just to notice what's going on. We're going to lower all the way down to the belly. So when you feel ready, we're coming down here. It's a little dangerous territory down here right now for me. A wrestling match going on next door. So we're gonna stretch out the legs, press them down into the floor, spread out the palms, come into a cobra. Come on back down. Slide your hands back. So we're pushing the legs down, broadening the collarbones. Give your neck a little love. And one more time. Right. So bring your elbows to the ground. So we're in a bit of a sphinx. We're going to press the legs into the ground and reach through the front of the thigh. So stretching the hip flexors in a more active way now. Hello. Two more breaths here. I'm getting distracted. Sorry about that, y'all. All right, so we're going to take the right leg and lift it and bring us all around with the right leg. So I'm going to slide all the way to the edge of the mat, bring my right leg around and sit up to it. Now you can leave your knee up. You can cross it over the top of the left leg, or you can drop it open, which is what I'm going to do. And if you wound up turning away from the camera, you can just adjust yourself however you like. We're going to sit up nice and tall and twist towards that right leg. So, just finding our way into this twist. And one of the things that I'm really digging about a twist right now is this opportunity to create a little movement in my upper back. This is where I carry a lot of my stress. I don't know why life has been stressful lately, but in any case, it helps. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to keep my lower spine right where it is. Where it is right now is how I'm going to hold on to it. You can use your arms to help you hold that in place. Then I'm going to move the shoulder blades. So the shoulder blade that's going toward the back end of the twist, right? If I'm turning, I'm looking in that way. That shoulder blade's going to go down and in. And the shoulder over here that's closer to the long leg, that one's going to go up and out. And you can adjust the head a little bit to make room for that. Then you're just going to release that upper back. Then do it again, shoulder blade down and in, up and out. And let it go. We're going to do that 3 more times. So my lower back is holding the twist just try to keep a little bit of height going. So you're still reaching through the crown of the head, but oh, we're doing that little movement in the shoulders. And then when you've gotten that third time going, you can come around out of your twist. Now, we have to switch sides. So you could just switch legs, or you can dive back in. Do a little cobra, because it's interesting. And then take your left leg up and bring yourself up. Because I sometimes like to shake things up a little and transition in different ways. Why not? We're here. All right, sit up tall. Turn towards that side that you got. Whether your knee is up, across, whatever you did last time, do that again. Get your lower half of your spine, everything from the rib cage, middle of your rib cage down, solid. So use your arms to hold that in place. Do as you like with your neck, right? Because we're going to do the shoulder blade. So now this shoulder blade is going up and out, and this shoulder blade is going down and in. So I'm just trying to move that tissue that lives between the shoulder blades, and it almost feels like I'm making a figure 8 in that muscle tissue. Get 3 more of those. And basically just hold it for a breath and let it go on the exhale. One more. Come on out of there. All right, so I'm gonna spin around to the front so it's easier to see what's going on here. And we're gonna take the legs out wide. Now, for some people, taking the legs out wide means the pelvis goes backwards. So again, a couple of options. One, bend the knees. That might be all that is necessary for you to get your pelvis forward. Option 2 is to sit up on the edge of a folded blanket. So that will elevate your pelvis, that might help. Option 3 is to bring the legs closer together. Because for some of us, the legs going out wide is the issue. It pushes the femur bone into the hip socket and pushes the hip backward. So just bring the legs a little less wide, and that might be all that is necessary. Now, we're gonna go into this three different angles. So I'm gonna start going over the left side, lift it up nice and tall and fold in towards the left. I'm gonna let my right sit bone kind of lift a little bit, and then I'm gonna press it back down. So there's a longer stretch on that right side. Now, that might be all that happens. You just hold steady there. You can reach out and grab hold of your foot if that feels interesting to you. Engage a bit through the top of the thigh. Try to bend your knee and lift your kneecap slightly. More big breath here. Come on up. Now before I do the other side, I'm going straight down the center, and this might feel a little lopsided at first. So I'm gonna let my back round on the exhale, but I'm gonna inhale and lengthen. So creating a little bit more space. There may not be a choice. Genetically, some poses are better for us than others. Okay, so I'm going to come all the way up on an inhale. Okay, so then I'm going over this side. Now again, there's this tendency for the sit bone to lift up, which is fine. That is what it's following along. And what I can do for the extra stretch is I can press it down for the exhale portion, and then inhale and kind of let it go a little bit. Again, bend the knee, lift the kneecap a little, so your hamstrings get the message to let go a little bit. I'm noticing a tendency to want to like harden in my mouth as I push that hip down. So I'm trying to be aware of that. Get a little softer in the mouth, a little less determined. Last breath here. So with your inhale, come all the way up. And one more time, we're just going to go straight down the center just for a couple breaths. can make that mostly a movement oriented. You can stay sitting up in the center, that's fine too. Alright, yogis, all we have left is Shavasana. And so we're going to take ourselves into a final relaxation shape. If you would like to do like a legs up the wall, or throw your legs up over your couch or over a chair, that's a way to do an inverted kind of version of this pose, or you can just stretch out and lie down. I'm going to use this blanket underneath my knees, just like I've got it here. And I like it a little closer to the thigh. Some people prefer the blanket under the knee exactly. So you can kind of fiddle with that a little. Snuggle your shoulder blades underneath you. Now the idea behind forward bends is that they kind of help us go inward, and they're a transition-y pose into kind of a more relaxed state. But see if that's true for you, because maybe for you that's not the right pattern, right? Maybe for you something else would have been a better pose to do near the end. Just notice, because it's the way that you shape your home practice. Yet, but do just, come back from whatever land you traveled to. And put your awareness back into your body for a second. And notice anywhere that might need just a little breath movement into it. So maybe you're going to take some deep breaths and let yourself feel the breath in the fingertips, for example. Let the arms relax so deeply that you can feel the breath move through them. Direct some breath into your low back or down the legs. Breath is just going in and out through the lungs, but our attention paid to the fact that the whole body moves. This is the whole premise for yoga, is that the body is connected, and as we move through these different postures, we impact the whole system. Behind the physical practicing, right? Can you feel how the movement of the ribs, the diaphragm, all impact the whole body? There's a kind of wave of movement happening in your body all the time because of the breath. Because of the consistent movement of your heartbeat. start to stretch your body out as you breathe. When it feels like a good idea, you can give yourself a little hug, maybe a back massage, or the road. And then we'll join each other. Let's take a nice big breath together. Let go with a sigh. Thanks for joining me here today, yogis. And thanks for being patient while I worked out all my seemingly endless technical issues. Namaste.